Good morning, everyone. This is Tara Lee Live, and we are live again here on YouTube. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for coming in today. I'm going to make sure you all make sure to get it up on live chat if you're tuning in with us live. If you have it on top chat, you'll miss some comments. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and share this, by the way, if you think somebody might like this information, because today we are going to be sharing with you information about Jadam and KNF. And I think it's an awesome subject because not enough people talk about these two things coming together and working in your garden as one. Everybody keeps separating these things to me. So this is going to be so cool, the conversation. And we're also going to be talking about some labs that LaLa did. And so she's bringing on a special guest, Preston. And then Drake is also here with me, my co-host, as always. Awesome, awesome. So let's start off this today with a big fat dab. And then I'm going to let LaLa just jump right in and we are going to go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm so excited to be here today with Preston. It's been almost too long. I mean, it's like COVID was an entire world, right? And I had a beautiful conversation with Preston right at the onslaught of this thing. And I just feel like the journey since then has been so rich, and we get to talk about biochar and all our discoveries. But anyway, I won't keep belaboring, but we're going to tie in last week's lab conversation because I feel like we're still engaged in really exploring what lab does. Speaking with Preston today is even going to further that conversation. So we're going to just share a little bit of that and then lead straight into just some beautiful conversation and catch up with Preston Smith. But welcome, Preston. What do you say? Hi to everybody.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome, Tina. It's a pleasure to be here on Tara Lee Live. Thank you. So stoked to share about natural farming and biochar and labs and anything else you want to talk about. So stoked to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Preston. So any shout out for anyone who knows Preston and who's familiar with his work. He's a hemp farmer and an alchemist, a permaculturist, a natural farmer extraordinaire. Anyway, we're going to get there. But Tara, my rice wash was a failure. So we get to see what.
Let me go grab mine. Let me grab mine because I want to see what the difference is between a failure and what is going to work.
I know. I had it at perfect, and then I just didn't do it. You know, that procrastination thing will bite you in the ass when it comes to lab.
So was it just a time thing that allowed it to go too long?
Yeah, too long.
Too long.
And you know, Tara does it, and jump in anytime, Preston, because I'm sure you've got some lab experience under your belt. But I feel like it's really important with the rice wash to catch it at almost the exact time, because I think there might be a relationship with yeast. And so when you get that cheesy smell, it's actually a yeast introducing into your lactobacillus. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a lot of yeast. There's a lot of acetic acid bacteria and lactic acid bacteria out there. So I find that too. And once it goes bad, you know it, you get that really off smell. And it's really like within 12 hours or so.
Is it really the smell that we're really going for and also the look, or is it just the smell?
It's both.
Both,
maybe it's a little both. Because this has got, so
mine's
this
not
has
ready.
Got a yellow film on the top of it. It ends up showing up sometimes in the lab.
Oh yeah, it looks kind of nasty.
Yeah, usually it'll have a kind of slightly sweet, like going a little bit sour, but mostly sweet. And then you'll get a little bit of film along the top as well. And that's usually when I will put it with milk at that point.
Oh, so do you think that this is probably, because it doesn't have a funk to it, but it's got that cheesiness to it. Would you do it pre-cheesy, or like, is this good, you think?
I think even pre-cheesy, you know, I have good luck just from leaving sometimes 24 hours, leaving a rice wash collection out. And I've had really good luck with my labs. They don't go bad. I mean, it's worked out for me pretty well.
Yeah, so the time limit that you're leaving your rice wash can really vary between like 12 hours and 5 days. But I've never, now that my environment is so sort of saturated, I think, with some good stuff, it's like it doesn't take long for me to come up with inoculated rice water. Like
Right.
12 hours is
Yeah, that's about what's worked for me too. Just 12
nice.
to 24 hours. Yeah.
Wow, very good to know.
I've been
Cool.
using almond milk and oat milk lately, and I've really loved those, by the way.
Okay, thank you for
Mhm.
opening that conversation, because there are a lot of people that are asking for alternatives to milk.
I was thinking
Right.
about trying coconut. How about coconut milk?
Yeah, I did a coconut milk batch, and it was great. It does seem to have less of a curd head that forms, and so I've seen people use coconut milk for labs, and sometimes it's kind of hard to separate out the curds. It's a little different than like dairy or some other milks, so it'll kind of be more like almost a yogurt that forms, and so you just kind of have to deal with that and strain it off as best you can.
So coconut, we've got another person in the chat who's tried coconut. Do you think it's the fat in the coconut that might have that effect?
I do, yeah. It will very
Yeah.
different than the animal curds for sure. It's
Yeah.
it seems to kind of it doesn't curd up and harden off the way that like animal fat does. I've noticed it's just more of a liquidy kind of yogurt.
Okay. Do you think that it's
Hey, Col-
attracting different kind of lacto, or do you think the lacto is just adapting to its environment no matter where it is? And
Well, that's the question. I think it'd be really fun to do some analysis on the different labs to see what's being collected. But my inkling is that it's a form of lactobacillus, and it's going to work very similarly whatever milk you're using.
yeah.
Can I prove that scientifically? No, but from my use of different milks and making labs with about 4 different milks so far, they all seem to work very similarly, and it's a similar approach. So
Beautiful.
you see the
Thank
same
you.
results.
Thank you for making that a simple solution, because yeah, I hadn't really tried it with other milks. So, and I know a lot of people are concerned about it. So,
Mhm.
and also just scientific, like I know it's important as we go forward to really set up some side-by-sides and understand the processes that we're implementing on a level that's going to lead towards that kind of discovery and alliance with the science world. But I personally want to just emphasize that the way we learn as citizen scientists and natural farmers is through the actual doing and the observation through our own hands and our own work. And so walking the garden daily and smelling your lab daily and just really attuning yourself to the things that are going to lead you to understand your world. So, and I think you're one of the practitioners that really utilizes observation in such a profound way that you don't even really realize it maybe, but like I look to you for that.
Oh, thanks, Tina. Yeah, I think that's a really, really important, one of the real foundational principles of really natural farming. The alchemists of old called it organoleptic observation. It's basically tapping into your senses. We are adapted to have certain senses. Like a really stinky anaerobic pile could potentially have some pathogens that could hurt you. And so it's very off-putting to us. Like that is a mechanism of nature. That's how we've evolved, so we do have these instincts. And so there's a big part of, I feel like natural farming is tapping into these instincts, these intuitions in nature, and really looking to nature to emulate how nature's processes work and look to her for the answers. I mean, science is really awesome.
Hold on. We're losing you, and I don't want to lose any of your words.
Well, here we'll mute his camera quickly and see if that comes in.
I did. I stopped his video in
We've
just a
got
minute.
a couple questions here. We've
Okay.
got one.
But let's not take the question first. Let's stay on that first, and then we'll come back to that question.
We've got two questions that we've been.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody, I'm going to kind of let LaLa lead this today, and we're going to take all your questions, and we will be putting them in chat as they come in. So LaLa will have a list of all your questions. So please be patient with us, and we'll try and get them all answered for you today.
Yeah.
Preston, did you come back in on us? Here you are. Are you there? I hear you.
So I can actually answer some chat questions while we let Preston
Okay, go ahead.
our environment here, because we are an ecosystem, in fact. So Corey's asking, have you tried using barley? Would that work instead of rice? And I do, I think, yeah, any of the grains, especially like, I feel like personally, and maybe when Preston gets back, he can kind of support this or even elaborate. When you have milled rice that's not even available in some countries and other places that you really just have some grains that you're building or that you're growing or even harvesting in a wild way, I believe that those are going to have some very unique and diverse colonies of lactoacid bacillus. And it's really about understanding that you're attracting something with food. And so if you think like a microbe and you're thinking like a bacillus, like what would be the thing that you would love to eat? And boy, man, a wild rice hull in a wild rice field, I'd be just an ecstatic little bacteria. Hi, Preston.
Hey, sorry, I lost you guys for a minute.
No worries.
Hey, Preston, just a thought. I don't know if you have it to where you're, are you on your Wi-Fi or are you on your cell phone? Because sometimes that can go back and forth and throw you off. I don't know. I just wanted to remind you of that.
I'm on my cell at the moment. I actually don't have Wi-Fi currently. I'm up in the hills, so.
Oh, okay. So that could be why.
Okay.
So we'll just.
Yeah, hopefully the connection will be strong enough. I'm up here in the hills of Williams, Oregon.
We're going to work with this because, the universe will provide, because I'm so excited. We have such.
Yes. So LaLa, I was going to say, do we want to really tell who Preston is and we want to talk about that? Are we at that step? Because everybody that might be everybody's new to Preston. He's never been on my channel before. So I'm super excited to have you here. And LaLa, you are so beautiful. I love the way you're having this conversation and you're leading it amazing. So please continue.
Well, it's the way we get to gather, right? And it's the way we get to share. And yes, I do want to touch on regionalism because it is so important. And yet at the same time, we're being challenged at mycelial to kind of connect via the internet and via, we might even have to figure out how to get our own satellite eventually, but like, whatever. Like, I feel like this is as an important way of sharing information. And then if this is the way we share and then we go into our own spaces and practice, then that's like a beautiful expression of regionalism. And this is Preston Smith, everybody. His company is Living Abundance Herbals, correct?
Yes, thank you.
He has this one, I'm just going to straight up name it right now. Your fire cider is flipping amazing.
Thank you.
He makes mead. He's an alchemist. He's a permaculturist. He's a corporate dropout of total mind-blowing levels of initiation. You got initiated. I want to talk about that sometime, but anyway, love you. Here's Preston, everybody.
Love you too, Tina. Thank you for that intro. And I'm very honored to be here. And yeah, wow, I'm very inspired, mutually inspired by you, Tina, and the work that you've been doing. Just had a strong connection ever since we met at Chris Trump's level 2 class out in Boise. So just really stoked to be here and share with all of you.
Wow.
Thank you. And I did share his Instagram link in chat. So please, everybody, go ahead and go and follow him up. And we'll bring up his Instagram link throughout chat too. And we'll give you a little view on that too. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So do we want a little bit of a history? Should I run it down real quick? The way I the things that popped up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so, and correct me when I'm wrong, well, it's just Preston Smith. So he is primarily focused on hemp, has had quite a number of years now utilizing Jadam and KNF in his applications, and also pest management, really keyed into the Jadam level on that. He's truly a natural farmer and a practicing one. So I'm just pleased to announce him. We're going to be talking. This is not the last time we're going to talk to Preston. And so since we're going to do it in an hour, we're going to focus first on kind of like talking about the differences between the differences between Jadam and KNF first, to really understand some of the fundamental principle-based differences between them. And then we're going to explore, supported by Master Cho with this dialogue and with how Preston has gone about learning and applying, because he's very much in communication with his elders concerning this teaching. So I trust everything that he says according to his experience and knowledge base. So we're going to be talking about how to marry the two, how to utilize the strengths of both. He's also a teacher. I haven't been blessed to be part of his community during his teaching time, but I'm super excited to be. Oh, there's your IMO spa. Yeah, there's just so much to talk about. Cool.
Okay,
Fun
go
workshop.
ahead. I'll let you guys get back to it. I wanted to show some pictures off. Any time that we need to refer to any one of those pictures, please let me know and I can bring that back up for you.
Thank you, Tara. You're amazing.
Great.
So you want to talk about some of the principal differences between KNF and Jadam, Preston?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah. I had a really last year, and I got to talk to Young San Cho, founder of Jadam. This is Han Kyu Cho, Master Cho's son, who started Jadam, which is its own system for natural farming, kind of separate from Korean natural farming, but also very influenced by Korean natural farming. So, I got to ask him directly what he thought about mixing Korean natural farming, his father's traditional system, with his system, Jadam. And, what really came up was there's fundamental differences on the approach. And so with Korean natural farming, you're really trying to build the resilience of the plants and doing a lot of upfront precautions. Whereas in Jadam, you're using a regular regimen of pesticides. So there's a lot of preventative measures in Korean natural farming. There's not a whole lot of the pesticidal applications that Jadam gives you. So this is where I see that they both have a lot to offer and complement each other, because you have all these protocols and solutions, these pesticides for dealing with pests with the Jadam, and then you have these really tuned in methods for creating very micronized, fermented, concentrated solutions in Korean natural farming that really is applied at a homeopathic dose. So really the concern there inherently is that when you're spraying these pesticides, there's going to be some innocent bystanders, so to speak. There's going to be these beneficial microbes that we are culturing and adding to the mix, building these symbiotic relationships with Korean natural farming. Anytime we're using these pesticides to deal with some pests, we will be taking out some of those guys. So really my approach is using the resilience and using the IMOs and the JMS, Jadam microbial solutions, using those together. And I can talk about how I use both of those together. But, using the methods we have from Korean natural farming up front, and then as a, for me, I don't do a regular regimen of the pesticide. I'm actually only using it when I'm seeing problems, pest issues. And so therein lies the problem, though. I mean, it can be navigated for sure. I see these two marrying very nicely, KNF and Jadam. However, you have to be careful with the sprays. If you're doing full-on Jadam protocol, you will be spraying pesticide whether you see an issue or not weekly. That's not the approach in Korean natural farming. And again, with some of the really strong herbs that I'm using to deal with pests, chances are they're taking out some of the lactobacillus and beneficial fungi and other yeasts as well. So that's kind of the fundamental thing to really keep in mind. So Young San Cho really stressed that when you're doing these regular protocols, using things like sulfur too, to me, that's like only a last means, kind of like in your arsenal for that nuclear bomb, only when you really need it. I don't actually use a lot of sulfur myself. I'm using strong herbs that have worked great for me. So those are kind of the fundamental differences. And, we can get into more detail about using them together, but I wanted to talk about those fundamental differences first.
Well, that's a great point. LaLa, you are muted, so you'll have to unmute there quickly.
Why?
And Matthew Gates actually touched on that as well with all these like even, you know, organic or biological controls. You still have to be very careful with how you apply them because they're going to affect all the biology around you in your area, and that can trickle out pretty extensively. So thank you very much. That was great. Continue, please, LaLa.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So much to unpack in what you just offered. So first of all, strong herbs have the capacity to damage lacto-acid bacillus.
Yeah, things like bay laurel, absolutely, in strong doses, absolutely. Yeah, essential oils are very powerful. There's a lot of antimicrobial properties within some of these volatile herbs, such as bay laurel.
Okay, this is just a personal, like, now I'm going to go down my own rabbit hole with you, then we'll extract and go back and recover some stuff. But I'm going to ask you this, like, maybe I should save it for later. Have you thought about using the shilajit? Or we have to have a shilajit conversation.
We have to have a show. Yeah, that's a whole show. What are you doing here?
I just asked that. Let's just time warp. Rewind 2 seconds. I did not say that, Preston.
If you're asking if I've used the shilajit, the stuff you sent me, I have used it internally and I love it. It's too valuable for me to use on my garden because I don't have access to a lot of it.
Let's talk. We'll talk.
So
Let's talk.
I've been taking it internally and I love it. It's great.
We're going to talk. You just opened a door for me. So I'm like, okay. But anyway, we're going to go back. So all right. Resilience as an upfront prerequisite for everything, right? When we're marrying the two, we're talking about building resilience, not only in our soils, but in you're muted again. Damn. Okay. I'm going to just kind of rehash because am I good? We're good. I'm not hearing Preston. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So that the resilience. So we're talking, this is what we're trying to do. And then the difference between Jadam and Cannabis being the application of pesticides. And so sort of that decision has to be well informed by what our intentions are. And so if we are in fact building resilience within our garden spaces and within our beds, and that's number one priority, then we shouldn't need to be using any pesticides. And so that is the ultimate goal. So it's not like seeing a bug, having a reaction, got a deal, and then you're always on the attack. We have to really change our fundamental understanding of what we're trying to do when we're applying KNF or Jadam, and understand that we have the capacity to build systems that do not need pesticides, not only in our living beds, not only inside, but in our outdoor spaces. And that's the thing that we don't know. And we have to trust and we have to practice to know. And I think you're here to say, and I'm here to say that yes, resoundingly, we can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Good.
Yeah, fully agree.
Yay, man. Yeah. So yeah, KNF up front. I was curious about that. Do you mean like you start off as a KNF and sort of bring Jadam in, or are you applying Jadam and KNF symbiotically the whole way through?
Okay. Well, I'll give you one example that really ties into the season that we're in right now. We're in winter time. So, when we take an approach of Korean natural farming, Jadam, or really to me, any kind of natural farming, we are looking to nature to emulate what she is doing. So right now in autumn, we look up at the deciduous trees and they're all dropping their leaves down and forming a natural mulch layer, right? Which is a protective layer for all those beneficial microorganisms in the topsoil. And in turn, they are decomposing that matter into available humus for our plants. So right now is the time that we want to be applying. I just did a workshop and we applied a bunch of different manures, shot a little video too, I'll be putting up on my YouTube channel. But essentially I use like horse manure, goat manure, and chicken manure, spread that all out. And I got 3 barrels of Jadam microbial solution going. So I'm going to go ahead and spray over all the manure that I've put down and really inoculate, the soil to get all those microbes to start going down in the rainy season and flushing down into the earth. But to really start breaking down that compost, that manure that we're adding to, because we want to give that time to break down over the winter time. The time to add compost and manure is not in spring and summer. It doesn't have time to break down. It can be really nitrogen hot, cause a lot of issues. So again, whenever we have questions, we can just look towards nature and look, okay, all the leaves are falling to the ground. Nature's giving herself time for that, those leaves to break down into available form for our plants. So we are doing the exact same thing. So right now I'm applying manure to the beds, and then I'm inoculating with the JMS. I'm also making piles of IMO piles that I'll wait to add in springtime right before planting. So the big difference that how I use JMS and IMOs together, traditional IMOs from KNF, is I'm inoculating right now with the JMSs because that's going to be more the deeper soil horizons, the facultative, bacteria and fungi that are going down deep into the soil, breaking down hard clay, rock, organic matter into available matter. So I've seen dramatic results from applying JMS to very hard clay and volcanic pumice soils out here in Southern Oregon. And I've seen them transform. And of course, using a mulch layer too. Always very crucial whenever inoculating. Mulch goes hand in hand, literally, with these microbes to protect them. And really seeing some great transformations happen over a few months with JMS. What I'll do is I'll alternate lactic acid bacteria 1 week. The next week I'll do a JMS application and do soil drenches all through the winter if I'm trying to break down really hard clays and rock. And so then I come in really springtime, right before we're ready to plant, is when we want to be applying our traditional indigenous microorganisms, because they are now the topsoil layer. These are the aerobic fungi that we've been culturing, building these associations with these symbiotic associations with our plants. So really, we want to add those in springtime, right before planting and right after. So there's two ways that we can use a Jadam technique with the Korean natural farming technique, both at different times, but to help with different soil horizons and really start to build our soil and the fertility.
Thank you. That was one of the most thorough and just expansive. This is a video that you will all need to watch several times as you're sort of preparing for your next season. I can concur with a lot of what Preston has just stated in his applications as accurate and very effective. I need to actually up my game to even get to where you're at. I am so excited. Thank you for sharing so deeply.
Oh, absolutely.
My God. Okay, so horse, goat, and chicken, are you doing those as a side-by-side? Or are you mixing those together?
I'm mixing them together. Yeah, that's just what I had access to. A friend of mine right down the street has a horse. So she's like, here, have all the horse manure you want. And there happen to be goats and chickens on the property. So, use what you have access to. That's really,
so
yeah, simple. That's really another fundamental principle is use what you have, use what's around you. Because,
I have goat only.
Yeah, and this brings up, this illustrates a really important point, I think, in natural farming. It's like, we need to use what we have around us.
100%.
And so if you're in an area where white rice is an exotic import, do you throw up your hands and say, well, I can't afford it, or I can't source it, so I can't do natural farming. I can't grow IMO ones. Absolutely not. You find something that is going to work for that region. That is the whole principle behind Korean natural farming. So we don't want to get lost too much and like, oh, you have to do it this way.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying don't follow the protocols, but remember the principles of use what you have available. Yes. And if you're using these exotic imports, is that really the fundament? Is that really the core principle of KNF or Jadam? No, this is supposed to be very simplified to use what you have around you, the resources, the plants, the animal manure,
And nature
around
as a
you.
guide, and nature as a guide, which you so eloquently said. And so I just want to reiterate, because I think it kind of maybe it's so simple that it's somewhat lost on us sometimes, is that when you're following a lineage-based teaching that Korean natural farming certainly is, that's going to tie us back to our traditional ways of doing things before we were taken into a realm where we were taught to look outside ourselves for the solutions, right? We haven't been on this capitalist train for a long time, and before this, when we were assigning value to things, we were actually providing not only for ourselves but our families, but our friends and our neighbors and our townships and our cities. And it was resonant out from where we were, because we knew at that time that we could take care of ourselves, feed ourselves, and depend on what we have in front of us, do what we need to do with what's in front of us. So as a principle-based teaching, looking to nature is such an beautiful guide, like just mimicking natural systems. So when you're like, when some of this seems overwhelming, and it certainly can, like when you're first exposed to natural farming, you're just like, it's a whole so just going back to the principles, and knowing that you can do what you need where you are, using nature as a guide, mimicking nature. These are so profound. Just concentrate on those. You'll be fine.
Yeah, so true. So true. Anytime, that's what Master Cho says too. Anytime you have a question, he says that, let's see, the farm is the university and our plants are our teacher. And for me, that is so true, because I love science. I love reading about research and science and all of that. Reductionistic science has a lot to offer, but I also think a naturalistic approach of really observation, or not seeing yourself as separate of nature, and really, I think you can glean a lot from nature by spending time in nature and just observing, looking at how the elements are interplaying and the seasons and how these cycles of change happen. There's a lot of real wisdom that we can glean from nature, and just observing her processes and then applying them our best, and really getting out of our own way, because that's a big part of farming, is like we're getting in our own way of the plant success, and like there's this inert potential in our plants and our crops and our farm, and to really step back and be able to have that vision of that potential.
trust nature.
Yeah.
Trust ourselves that we can actually be in collaboration with nature, and that she can be our teacher, and that we can be students.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to go back to your mulch layer, because let's go back to that layering of nature that tells us and informs us that in springtime it really is about the facultative anaerobic bacteria, and that is in large part what Jadam has to offer, simply because it's utilizing leaf mulch, and it's utilizing wet environments, and those naturally bring about these microbes that do the work of harvesting clay and building soil. And last interview, you mentioned a straw layer. So I just wanted to go a little bit more into detail, exactly like, because I'm going to do it. I've got my JMS. I'm ready to go. Jadam microbial solution. For anyone who has any questions about that, we'll do a tutorial on it. We'll talk about that in depth sometime. Anyway, I just went off. Bring me back.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, thanks everybody for joining us. And LaLa, you're doing great. I love this conversation. And man, Preston, I'm going to have to rewatch this. I don't normally like to rewatch my videos because normally I'm talking, but now I can rewatch this one because you have so much information and I just love it. Thank you for really being here today. This is the first time we're meeting, and everybody in chat, please share this out if you think someone needs this information. It's really going to help people save money. That's what's so important right now. We need to save money, so please continue, everyone. Thanks everybody for being here in chat. Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
We definitely
Someone's licking their chopstick stir.
Oh God.
I'm sorry. I like to engage with the audience. Tell us about the mulch layer, because I'm going to go do that right now.
Oh, well, it's crucial. I mean, I had the wood chipper out, and so wood chipper is a great investment for creating mulch. The thing with wood chips, like biochar, is it can be essentially a vacuum unless you charge that. So it's important to charge wood chips and biochar.
Let's
And
skip
I
the
think,
mulch and get right into that. Oh my God. Okay.
yeah, so I'd love to dive down the rabbit hole about charging, because I think there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there on actually what charging is and how long it takes. But staying with the mulch, leaf mold, wood chips, straw, if you have access to that. So any of that, and you don't need a really thick layer. I use a thicker layer if it's like clay and really hard clay soil I'm trying to break down. But really all you need is about a 70% cover. So staying with that golden ratio that we use so much in Korean natural farming, 70-30 ratio, over and over again, it comes up. And so I work within those ratios a lot. And so 70% covered is really perfect. So 30% light penetration, 70% covered. It doesn't have to be an ultra thick mulch, but just enough to retain moisture, really, give life, because water is life. Retaining some moisture in the soil is crucial to keep the microbes alive. And, one example I can use is some greenhouses I was working at. I had a previous partnership. They weren't watering their beds through the winter, and they completely dried out, even though they had a mulch layer. And so when we're, using organic living soil, it's really important we keep our moisture levels always accurate and right, because if you don't and it dries out, you kill all that life in the soil you've been building, and then you have this hydrophobic soil that's even harder to correct.
Let's talk about that real quick, because in the cannabis community, there is a tendency to overwater. And so there's this interesting play, and cannabis doesn't necessarily like super wet conditions.
No.
And I think a lot of cannabis growers are overwatering. So do you have any tips for how to kind of maintain and achieve, besides actually having an incredibly rich microbial will literally keep, and the anaerobics, the facultatives actually, I think, keep moisture in the soil. But anyway, how do we go from overwatering stuff to that richness?
Great question, and a really important point. So I worked in retail grow in Humboldt County when I lived there, and I'm not going to name names of who I worked for, but just got to see behind the scenes of, in the nutrient companies, and a lot of shenanigans that go on behind the scenes with nutrient lines, and selling you all kinds of BS in a plastic jug with a fancy label on it, and charging you an arm and a leg for it, and realizing, oh, I have access to, all this stuff out there. So, as far as watering goes, there were two things. The reason I brought that up is there are two things that came up the most for folks who would come in for advice on growing. Number one, they were overwatering was the first problem that was had. The second problem was overfeeding. Those were the first two problems we saw from the majority of growers who came in. So it wasn't a lack of nutrients. It wasn't lack by any means. People are constantly overdoing it. And so this is where KNF is beautiful, because we're talking about really, really, really concentrated. They're concentrated inputs, but they're diluted heavily down, 1 to 1,000, 1 to 500 dilutions like this. So we're working like very delicate concentrations that are real homeopathic. So the reason how I get around or work with water in the soil is really just watering less, but definitely not ever letting my soil completely dry out. I think that's easier to do outside than it is in a greenhouse or an indoor. You really have to be on top of that if you're growing indoors or in a greenhouse, and you're covered from the rain. So I would say, just in general, mulching, just by mulching, you can stop watering as much as you're watering, but making sure you have damp soil, but never like super saturated, I like to let my garden dry out, not to the point of wilt, but almost to the point of adding a little bit of stress to my plants and then water. And again, just not overdoing the nutrients or the feedings and watering, because again, those were the first two issues that we saw predominantly of most of the growers that I saw in Humboldt County.
Absolutely. And how do you think cover crops, have you been doing much with cover crops? Do you think that really is sort of like one of those added steps into sort of like creating a condition where moisture can be preserved in an environment?
Yeah, I like to add cover crops for sure. I think the issue there that I've seen is people choosing things like legumes, vines that can grow up into the canopy. I've seen that happen where it wasn't maintained and people just let it go buck wild.
Yeah.
And it grew up into the canopy, choking out plants. And really, a lot of times that's where you start to see disease forming, is those overcrowded areas aren't getting enough oxygen. They're not getting enough light. They're overcrowded, and you always see like issues take place in those zones. The elements aren't balanced. So anyways, yeah, cover cropping is great. I like things like clover and purslane and things that stay on the ground and don't compete up into your canopy. So if you're using things like legumes and what have you, nitrogen fixers like that, you're going to have to do maintenance chopping that back. When you're talking about, acres and acres of hemp, or, if you're trying to grow on that scale, I would not recommend using things that you're going to have to go and that are going to compete with your crop essentially.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're talking outdoor, indoor. Those are two different languages. And since I've sort of I play around with both environments. They're very, and this is my first time playing with cover crops on an indoor situation, but there's interesting things about it. But I think cover crop is also one of those things that is misused most of the time.
I agree. Yeah.
So that's a whole nother day, a whole nother conversation.
It is. That's a whole talk show right there. And just pairing, forming those guilds that are right for the crop that you're growing, and not just choosing some random mix that a lot of people end up doing. I've seen that. I've seen people do it on tens of acres and have a lot of issues just doing these random mixes.
So yeah, it's one of those misused areas. So good. So back to the wood chips and biochar and the charging. Let's just go right into that.
Great. Yeah, charging. This is a really fascinating subject. There's a lot of disinformation out there. Some people think that you can just make a quick tea or like use fish emulsion and throw your biochar in a bath of that for a week, and there you go, you have charged biochar ready to go. I do not jump on that bandwagon whatsoever. I tend to err on the side of taking a lot of time to charge. So what I do is I make JMS teas, and I do fermented ocean water, because ocean water has all the trace elements you need. It also has a more diverse profile of microbes from the ocean. There's two classes of microbes, like, freshwater and seawater. And so it's good to add all those minerals from ocean water in the mix. So I like to charge with the ocean water, the JMS, Jadam microbial solution, and really let that biochar sit for a couple of months, on the off season. And then what I do is right before actually going out and spreading out the biochar on my field, what I like to do is bubble a liquid IMO4 tea with my biochar a few weeks before I'm going to add that to the soil, to really charge it up with some aerobic life as well. The JMS more, anaerobic that you would start with. But that's kind of the process I take. I start with JMS and fermented seawater and go to a liquid IMO4 tea a few weeks before planting. But giving that like some time too to really soak in and charge up, because I feel like people aren't giving it enough time to really charge.
That's gorgeous. And it's also kind of following the same pattern that you were following in your observation. You're going from that anaerobic facultative to more of the symbiotic with the actual living of the plant and the stuff that's going to come into symbiotic relationship with the roots and in that top layer. Like you just have this beautiful flow to the whole thing. And I think that's one of the things that's enamored me to natural farming, is just the way it allows us to flow with the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So then how are you taking, so you've got your biochar that you're now inoculated. How are you utilizing it, and what ratios and things with your mulches and your other systems of growing?
Yeah, the ratios, I'm essentially just doing like a JMS batch and charging just based off the Jadam recipe, charging my biochar with that. But I think depending on the soil that you're working with, whether it's harder or softer, it could vary from different applications. But in general, I go out, I do inoculations over the winter time with the JMS, and that's another thing you can do is charge in place. This is a workshop we just had making biochar from pine cones here. But there's this term charge in place. And so if you're going to do that, like if you go spread out a bunch of biochar, then you want to give that time like several months to soak up the minerals and go like be feeding and watering high mineral content flushes and JMS teas and compost teas, whatever you want to call them, adding those throughout the winter months and giving it time to really soak up, because essentially biochar uncharged is an empty vacuum that will leach nutrients. So if you just go add a bunch of biochar you just made to a garden that you're trying to grow, it could cause you problems the first year or two.
I am
really, if you don't
so glad we had this episode because we're just getting ready to make a hugel. And like, nice. I literally was going to just dig out of the fire pit and go just dump it in there. Like literally I was going to. So, oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. I had no idea. Woo.
Well, hugels are nice because, you have a lot of wood that's already inoculated. So if you're adding, biochar in with the hugel, you do have a lot of like associations of fungi already in the wood. So that could transfer out to the biochar as well. More easily. You don't necessarily have to charge biochar if you're putting it in a hugel, but I always recommend charging first.
So I would be safe with maybe throwing it in a hugel. So that's good to know. Okay, so because I'm also going to be doing other amendments, soil amendments this year too as well. I have straw over my beds right now. So thank you. This is awesome because that was one thing that Cannabis also recommended, that I start using biochar. And I just literally thought it was just char wood and you just throw it in the ground. Like, so, wow, no idea.
Yeah. Not all biochar is created equally. And even the different types of wood, hardwoods are less porous. So that's a more bacterial association, whereas more porous wood, softwoods, they tend to lend to fungal associations more because they're more porous. The mycorrhizae can, live in there and grow through those softer woods. And, an area of research that I look towards is Japan when it comes to biochar, because they have such a long history of creating biochar for fuel and a lot of other purposes. But Makoto Ogawa was a really influential researcher. The most famous in Japan, was 60 years of investigation into making biochar, and also the association of mycorrhizae with biochar specifically. He was the first one to study that. And so there's a lot of knowledge and really great wisdom and information there. Makoto Ogawa, highly recommend looking him up.
We could drop a link in the chat, somebody maybe, I don't know. That's sophisticated. How do you know the spelling of his name?
Yeah, Makoto.
Okay, thank you.
Ogawa. Makoto Ogawa.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh my goodness. I'm not even going to go into the fact that you used to live in Japan, and that's a very beautiful story. And I want to hear that sometime again. So So we had a question about the JMR to biochar for the ratio. Do you want to share some recipes or some techniques for inoculating through the Jadam, and then we'll go into the KNF techniques and kind of get a little more specific? Would that work?
Yeah, sure. That's cool. You know, with the JMS, I'm making it so right now it takes a lot longer, by the way, to make a batch of JMS outside in the colder months. I literally had ice form on the top of mine a few days ago, and I was thinking, wow, is this really gonna actually work? And it has. I've seen a lot of bubbles and growth on my JMS right now in December when it's even getting freezing. It takes a little more time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's taken me about 10 days to make a batch of JMS right now in the cold months. Okay. Whereas that would be like 3 or 4 in spring and summer. So like, you know, that's another point I want to stress with KNF and Jadam, variability to your region too. I found myself saying variability a lot in the last workshop I did, and it really is variable, a lot of these things to the region and conditions that you're working with. So right now I'm doing a 1 to 30 dilution with fresh water to the JMS that I'm spraying out in my field. And so I'll do that every couple of weeks, really. Depending on how good your soil is, you might need to only do 1 or 2 inoculations per winter with the JMS. But if you have harder soil, maybe hit it every week, you know, and make sure you have a good mulch out there. And then
are you warming your container when you're doing your JMS at all? Because you mentioned it's freezing. Are you taking any precautions to keep it warm at all? Or are you just letting it get cold?
You know, that's a good point. There are like livestock heaters you can put for their reservoirs, you know, to keep them warm. So that could be a technique to help speed it up so it doesn't freeze. But right now I'm not using any heaters. I just have it out in the cold. And it has worked. I have seen some really good growth, and I'll put out a video on this workshop I did last to show this. But anyways, it's worked fine. It's just taken a lot longer. Anytime it's colder, it just slows down the process of culturing microbes and fermenting exponentially. It happens a lot quicker in hot places.
And I think, and it's different, right? You just said regionally, variability rules because also I have a JMS. I always forget that's about 5 years old in a big tub, and I keep drawing it down and adding to it, and I have all these pictures of all the different, like I have.
Okay, we're speaking JMS. Let's just tell everybody what that is real quick, because we're getting a new
microbial solution, and it's basically what some people would say, throwing plant material in water and letting it putrefy. No, it's not that. It's much more complex, and there are levels and layers to it that are sublime. And so I just wanted to share quickly what I've got going, because I'd like to be part of that conversation, Preston. I'm so excited for this. So my one is very old, and I believe that it's the reason why I have lightning bugs on my property now. So I have some real interesting observations with that older JMS, but then I have a newer one that I started in the fall, which is basically my entire years of comfrey harvest, and all of my hemp leaves from my outdoor grow after shucking were put in this JMS. And then I dropped one of my facultative anaerobic bacteria balls in there rather than mold. And so I have this observation over time of that particular colony going through a thaw and a melt. And I think what I'd like to say is, you know, like, why put any external energy into it when nature knows best? And those facultatives are going to take, they're used to being in hot conditions. They're used to being in extreme conditions. They're used to being in non-oxygen and oxygen. So they have the ability to go with the seasons. And I believe their RNA signaling is actually what you're looking for. And that's what's going to add, that's what is activating them to do the work that they need to do. They're becoming acquainted with your season, with your place and your time. They're doing their work so that when you put them in the conditions, they're going to really be hungry for those minerals.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Now, a little distinction there. It sounds to me like you're referring to like adding in the grasses, the comfrey and everything, which is the JLF, Jadam liquid fertilizer.
Thank you.
And the JMS is Jadam microbial solution, which is just adding the starches to propagate microorganisms.
Let's go into that then and describe that process, because I totally just confused it. But anyway, yes.
But essentially, if you let a JMS go too far, then it's a JLF at that point. So it never goes bad. You can just create a JLF.
Oh, interesting. Well, thank you.
All of these acronyms. Oh my, oh my.
Yeah, I know that's hard. All the acronyms.
So
yeah.
I just wanted to mention really quick here in chat why we have an awesome audience. Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I want to let you know we're going to be coming at you every Wednesday. LaLa's got this plan that we've got some lineup of some amazing guests coming. So every Wednesday you can plan on being here. We're going to be talking something about KNF and Jadam. So thanks, you guys. This is amazing.
We'll have Preston back. Preston, will you come back and talk to us more for all the things we don't kind of get?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd love to continue talking about different projects and hear people's progress. It's always really fun to hear other people's stories of what they're growing and what they're applying and, you know, what they're seeing.
Yeah, for
sure.
So
I'd love to be here anytime.
Okay. Do we want to talk about and go a little deeper into the JMS and talk about it a little bit more and how you're I want to know. I'm back. I want to know more.
Well, I would just say to finish with the JMS that, you know, so really what we're doing is it's really simple. You get a bucket of water. Rainwater is always the best if you have access to that, or well water would be second best. And essentially you cook potatoes or any starchy root. You could use taro or you could use cassava. We did that in Hawaii. We made a JMS with cassava that worked great. So really it doesn't have to be like russet potatoes. You know, you could use really any starchy root to do this. So you cook them to the point of being palatable, and then essentially you mash them up in a static reservoir. And essentially add minerals to that, about 2 grams of sea salt per gallon, or if you have seawater, you can add that in there. And so now the microbes have a starch and a mineral source to start feeding off of that. So that's really the process. And generally it's really easy. A handful of leaf mold in there, some mashed up potatoes, and some minerals in the water, and then let it ferment, let those microbes eat. And I shouldn't even use the word static, because JMS really, this is kind of debated. Like, is it anaerobic? Is it aerobic? I mean, technically it's anaerobic because you're not using any oxygenation. You're not using any pumps in there. However, there are surface bubbles that are pulled down through fermentation into the mix naturally. It forms this toroidal current in your JMS. So that's pulling surface bubbles down in. So there is aerobic life happening for sure in JMS. Absolutely. It's not fully anaerobic.
Yeah, it's artful the way it works. I mean, it shows you the circularity of nature too. And I think it kind of encompasses that area where you've got the aerobic, you've got the anaerobic, and then you've got this beautiful interface where these organisms are literally doing the dance between oxygen and non-oxygen through our seasons. And so I feel like I love the JMS. It's
me
poetic.
too. Yeah, it's great. It's a great conditioner.
Do you think that the readiness is really literally when those bubbles pull away from the sides? Is that that subtle, or?
Yeah, it really is. You'll see the concentric ring around the center tea bag that you put in. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the first sign. And then you see the film form across the top, and then it breaks free from the sides. And, you know, you really do have about 24 hours to get that right at that moment. Yeah. If you let it go a day longer, then it has this kind of off smell to it. Yeah. And again, at that point, you can turn it into a JLF, throw a bunch of weeds in there and let it break down into a nitrogen fertilizer. But the JMS, what happens is you have that window of time where these microbes are feeding off of all the starches and minerals. And then if you let it go too long, another generation of microbes will eat them and kind of take over. And that's when you smell like these off smells that can happen. So you want to really utilize that mix when you've propagated that initial generation of microorganisms that you're cultivating or you're propagating.
That's so gorgeous. That also kind of like when people are so afraid of the anaerobic, right? And you're getting into those foul smells. And I feel like it's kind of, we're jumping too far into that place where outside of that balance, and we're trying to achieve that balance where those facultatives really do come into harmony with their environment. And it's such a necessary step, especially for like clay soils and things, because if you start to just go into the aerobics without dealing with learning about that balance, you're never going to have the success that you need. And that's the other thing that I've loved about marrying Jadam and KNF, is that it has allowed me to be productive in my own space just because of the clay.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's some other really interesting marriages between the feeding schedules of KNF and Jadam, and it's really, it can be really challenging to make traditional FPJs, fermented plant juices, on the scale that you really need them for doing large acreage. So this is, again, another area I see Jadam for their liquid fertilizer method, which is much easier, essentially tossing leaf mold and letting it break down, and now you have a liquid fertilizer. I see that is really lending itself a lot easier to doing larger scale production and farming. And this is what I've noticed growing on 10-acre plots with using Jadam and KNF, growing hemp, is implementing a lot more Jadam feeding regimens with the liquid fertilizers, and really saving my fermented plant juices for like the transition time, really catering that with the nutritive cycle theory, which is a really interesting part of KNF and the plant hormone side of what the solutions that we're making in KNF, and really these PGR plant growth hormones that really there's all these new studies coming out about how powerful these plant growth hormones are at the right stage, even in homeopathic doses. And if you use those in a way that you're like, if you use a transitional hormone in veg or flower, you can really throw off the cycle of your plants. So you got to be careful when you get into using these hormones, because they are existing in these FPJs. So I use them really for transitional and certain points in the plant growth life, but not all the way through. I'm using a lot more liquid fertilizers from Jadam, which makes it a whole lot easier than buying a bunch of sugar and really going out and trying to pick daisies, or it's not feasible for 10 acres.
Amazing. Do you have any, so in utilizing Korean natural farming in that way, where you're actually paying attention to the nutritive cycle and using it very sparsely and almost like a trigger only, right? And then counting on some of the other systems to really do the soil building and the relationship building with the microbes and all that. Do you have any plants that you really love to use for your KNF applications on a larger scale? Or
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one of my all-time favorites is purslane. It's an absolute all-star. I can't say enough good things about purslane. It was showing up very abundant on the farm that I was working at in the Rogue Valley, all over the farm, and it's loaded. I mean, it's talk about a superfood. It is more nutrient dense than any green that you're going to find in your health food store. Speaking of plants now, it has nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. It has all these trace minerals. It also has flavor enhancing alkaloids in it, and color enhancing too. So it is an absolute all-star. The other really beautiful thing about purslane is it's a succulent. And so when we're talking about a Jadam liquid fertilizer, where essentially we're just tossing a bunch of plant matter in a bucket of water with leaf mold to break down, purslane breaks down in 10 days time into a fully available plant form. So, when you're using things like cannabis, comfrey, things of that nature, you're looking at a couple of months to really break that down into available form. I mean, you could start maybe in a month, but to continue to let that break down to become fully available. And purslane, again, 10 days and fully available. So I absolutely love purslane. I think every farmer should grow some.
It was so funny because I didn't even know what that stuff was like 5 years ago, and it was growing like a weed. Let's
It's
just put
everywhere.
it that way. In my flower beds, in my gardens, I was just sick of this stuff. Like I was so sick of it. And finally, one year, I just covered it up. I was so tired of it, and I just mulched over the top of it. And I had the best growing cannabis plants that year in that spot that I just mulched and let that stuff go back in. I had no idea what I was doing. I got so freaking lucky. But now I know you can eat it and stuff. I haven't tried it myself to eat it, but I saw someone making it and juicing with it and making a pesto out of it. Was that your thing? I saw a pesto on your site, maybe?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I love making purslane pesto is amazing. Yeah. So yeah, that's so cool. I'm sure that cannabis was good. Yeah, mulch with the purslane. That's naturally it showed up on the farm we were working in the hemp garden, and so I used some for fertilizer, but I left a lot too for ground cover because it makes an amazing ground cover too. Yeah. So other plants. So here's the thing with different fertilizers that I like to use. I've really narrowed it down to only a handful of plants because there's many that just aren't sustainable. And we're talking about large scale, out here in the Rogue Valley, Southern Oregon, things like teasel, things like horsetail is another really great one for liquid fertilizers. Skunk cabbage is less abundant, but I love using skunk cabbage. It also breaks down quickly in liquid fertilizers, and it has similar terpenes to cannabis. It really helps with the terpene profile. So I love skunk cabbage. What else? Yeah, the things that really show up, blackberries. Also really, really love to make JLFs, Jadam liquid fertilizers, with the plant that you're growing. And this is another topic that I got to talk to Master Cho about directly. I remember we were hanging out on a farm here in Williams when they came to visit and did a workshop, and we'll just call it a tomato farm. But Master Cho was there, and he was holding this tomato, and and I asked him, I was like, so would it be best to make a fertilizer out of the crop that's being grown? Or should we use, like, they were growing some comfrey, like this great dynamic accumulator. I said, or should we use that comfrey? And he was like, no, always use the fertilizer, if you can, of the plant you're growing, because it's a direct analog of itself, has exactly what it needs, as far as nutrients and minerals and all that profile. So I've kind of stuck with that a lot. And actually now I try to convince everybody I'm working with, like the farms that I consult, like, grow a little crop to chop down just for, liquid fertilizers.
Well, and it's that 80-20, that lovely synergy again, too. If you were able to grow enough that you can spare enough to let it just go down and be part of your mulch over the season, that goes back in there, right? And then you're going to be able to use much less fertilizer the next coming seasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Definitely. That's a great practice right there. Yeah, so on that note too, that chop and drop style, that's kind of like a more permaculture style. And one thing that I really like to do is marry, like, permaculture and KNF. I've always seen that they work really well together. You don't have to choose one or the other and, be on this bandwagon and, that doesn't work because it's not permaculture, like terminology. Like, we can get lost in the terminology sometimes, I find, and that's why these acronyms can be kind of challenging too in Korean natural farming and Jadam. So that being said, though, things like mulching and doing the chop and drop technique, I think that KNF offers a really beautiful addition to that, in adding some of the IMOs when we're doing chop and drop, using these inoculant teas, these IMOs, to put out there with our mulches and really supercharging the soil. Because essentially that's what mulching does naturally. It helps to build that protective layer so the topsoil and all these microbes can start to thrive and build their colonies. But we're just supercharging it with KNF. So it's like a great addition to that chop and drop permaculture style.
Beautifully said. And just to reiterate, like I started off as a permaculturist before I did my natural farming training, and I was building modified swales but hugel in the swales, and that was in 2013 or something. So I had the opportunity to kind of, after my natural farming, to kind of dig into those swales to look at what the activity was like. And knowing that I have clay soils also, I was surprised that there was really literally no microbial life that had moved in. So it informed me that we really do need to incorporate the IMO technology as permaculturists and as people who are trying to regenerate and restore damaged ecosystems, because those microbes don't come back by themselves. Like, we are a necessary part of the ecosystem. We have to literally cultivate and help these systems rebuild. And so the IMO technology is like not just married, but it's like it's married to people.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Wow, thank you so much. I'm going to read something. Hermetia Elucin says, biochar should be quenched to increase porosity, cleaned of ash, micronized, charged with nutrients, inoculated with indigenous microorganisms, mixed with compost, aged to stabilize, and tested by worms. And I love his process. And one thing specifically I want to talk about is the micronization, because when I'm making biochar, now I know I'm actually making biochar more for microbial, because I'm not using hardwoods. I'm actually using like mint stalks and cannabis stalks and that sort of thing. So I'm not doing the micronization. What do you think the function of micronizing does? And also, like, do we do the biochar on top? Can we put it in the soils? Do we have to have it in the O layer? Like, let's talk about its functioning a little.
Yeah, I tend to think that there's no one approach to any of this. I've seen the application ratios I've seen from biochar fluctuate drastically, and I think that you can kind of dial it into the soil that you're working with. And I think that was a great comment that was just left. Yeah, that process there. The worms are a big part of it. If we look back to Terra Preta, which is ancient biochar from the Amazon, and today it's some of the most fertile soil on earth. This Terra Preta, that the Amazonian tribes, they find pieces of terracotta and clay and then human waste. So they were doing some kind of form of humanure with terracotta, and whether it was a slash burning technique or however they were doing it, they were creating biochar and inoculating it with human waste and terracotta. And I think, the worms, humic and fulvic acids are a big part of charging biochar too. But to me, biochar is absolutely the best amendment you can put in your soil, because you're forming these associations that are going to last for years and years to come. And Terra Preta is a prime example of that. Those tribes are long gone from the Amazon in those regions, and they have left some of the best soil on earth that is regenerating to this day.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that into the conversation. Yeah, I mean, because I really like the rice hull as a char too, just simply because of its shape. It's got that torus shape to it, so I feel like somehow the size of it is doing something. So I don't want to. Anyway, it's fascinating.
I guess to get to your question too about micronizing, I'm into micronizing the biochar too, down to pretty fine. I mean, not to like a powder. I like to leave it like small, gravelly sizes for sure.
How do you do that? I think do you roll something over it, or do you have a technique
for doing what now?
For the micronizing or breaking it down a little bit.
Oh well, I mean, we were just running over it with a truck and a piece of plywood, some of the biochar I made for a big application purpose. So there's that method. You could crush it just by, I guess, walking on it. I haven't come up with, I don't have big machinery or anything crazy that I'm using for that. So have to develop something for crushing it down more. So yeah, I'm into, I think it's going to have more surface area the smaller it is, but you know, I think there are varying views on the size that's perfect too. Again, like the raminal wood is really good for making biochar because it's higher in mineral content. Like the branches of trees that are like, you know, 4 inches up to about 4 inches thick. It's a very different, it's very different than like the core of a tree. If you burn that down, you have a lot higher minerals in that raminal wood and barks. And so again, to talk about like rice hulls, for instance, that's very hard. And you're probably not going to have a lot of fungal associations because it's not very porous. Whereas softer woods, you will form those kind of mycorrhizae associations there. So bacteria tend to work better with like harder woods, you know, they smaller little places for them to harbor in.
Cool. Thanks for that redirection.
So I had a couple thoughts. I know you live in Oregon. What about Eastern Oregon? You know, some of those things on that side, because I'm Washington, Eastern Washington. And then also, could I use mullein stalks as biochar? I know mullein's used for a lot of other things, but I have a lot of them. And it was just a curiosity thing, or is there something else I should be using them for? So go ahead.
Yeah, mullein's awesome too. Mullein would work great because it's such a huge plant and it shows up all over the place. There's no shortage of mullein around for sure. So that's another great one for making a liquid Jadam fertilizer with. But you can make biochar with that for sure. Yeah, it would. If you had all your stalks really chopped and dried and ready to go. The thing about making biochar too is you really want all your pieces very congruent and sized the same, because if you throw a big piece on here and a small piece on there, you're not going to have very consistent biochar when you're done. So there's a real technique to how you want to burn, and using pyrolysis, which is just really volatilizing off, you know, volatile compounds and sequestering all the carbon. So yeah, you can make mullein biochar. I love to make hemp stalk biochar. I did, I went up to a friend's farm in Bend, which is kind of more the environment of what you're talking about. He's a little more east, so it's more like high desert, a little drier out there. You know, and we dug out a pit and made, in one afternoon, we made tons of biochar, reduced about 10 acres of hemp residue in this huge pit in about 4 hours. We had about 10 guys throwing stalks on, you know, and because it's all really consistent, it made just an incredible biochar. And so that's really a key in the biochar, is having really consistent pieces and branches, and really those raminal sizes, less than like 4 to 5 inches thick.
Gorgeous. Somebody was asking earlier if we can use pea to charge biochar, and her Medio had said yes, as long as no antibiotics or anti-parasitic type medications or chemicals really in your system. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say sure. I see urine as, you know, urea is like the most available. You know, I don't like to add a lot of high nitrogen to, I hear this a lot, and some of the big companies, I won't name names, but some big companies out there are using like fish emulsion, for instance, to charge biochar. And to me, that's really not seeing what charging and what you're actually looking for really is. Had a really interesting conversation directly with Master Cho out in Hawaii last year. And there was a gentleman there who was making biochar, and what he said was FAA, fish amino acids, but he wasn't really doing that process to the book, like using sugar, equal parts sugar with equal parts fish, and creating a really nice fish amino acids. You know, so this gentleman was talking to Master Cho and asking him what he thought about his way of charging the biochar, which he was using this FAA, fish amino acids. And Master Cho's response was, well, that's a very narrow bandwidth of microbes that you're charging into the biochar when you're doing that. And there's this idea that I think, first of all, I'm going to say like nitrogen is way, way overused in the most part in most farming. And there's kind of this idea, I think people are addicted to nitrogen in agriculture. And there's this idea that we need to charge biochar with a lot of nitrogen. And I'm not on that bandwagon at all. I don't really add high nitrogen to anything that I'm charging my biochar.
Not only do farmers and everybody, but people that own lawns, you guys, lawns, quit putting fertilizer on your lawn. If you want it green, put ironite. That's all you need. If you want it green, ironite.
And IMO.
Crazy.
And IMO. Hermetia also says biochar is not a part of KNF. Is permaculture is okay with biochar? So just, I guess, let's talk a little bit about the relationship. Like, how does Master Cho feel about biochar?
Actually, he loves it, and it is a part of KNF.
Good.
It's not taught in the spectrum, but I want to, I want to remove that illusion that it's not part of KNF. It is. Master Cho directly talks about using biochar. You can also charge it in IMO 3 piles. Is another really good time for adding biochar into your IMO 3 pile. And so Master Cho loves biochar. I've talked to him about it in person, and he talks about putting it in your IMO 3 and charging it that way. And yeah, I've been including it in my workshops because it does tie into the Korean natural farming and Jadam system and permaculture as well. There's overlaps into all of these different protocols, so to speak. And I really look for those underlying principles and way that they all tie together. And biochar is part of all of those systems, and biodynamic as well.
Beautiful. Were there any other conversations between son and father about sort of like the cohesive applications of Jadam and KNF that we've missed, or that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think an interesting comment that I heard when Master Cho was asked what he thought about his son's method, because I mean, I don't want to bring up family history, but for years they weren't in communication, and the Jadam method was kind of its own thing, and then KNF was its own thing, and they've only kind of come back together and talked about kind of marrying the two. But direct comment from Master Cho in Hawaii last year was, he said that Jadam was the future. So I still love Master Cho's methods and use them, make all his traditional inputs, but I also like to use the Jadam methods as well. I think they do work really well together.
Beautiful.
So yeah, according to Master Cho, Jadam's the future.
And this kind of does bring us full circle, which is kind of beautiful, because I didn't plan it, but like right when we began speaking, I was curious about, of course I would lose my thought right now.
I think it's time for a dab. Well, take a dab, have a smoke, take a drink.
And
this has been incredible. Thank you both so much.
Yeah,
it was so perfect, and then it was so gone.
You're doing so good, LaLa. You've been awesome. Don't worry. Take a break. You've been doing awesome. Gosh, thanks everybody. I hope you're all enjoying this in chat. We're going to be sharing LaLa's link in chat for her Instagram. Make sure you all go check her out. You all better be following her already, but if you're not, we're going to share.
Yeah, let's all like
in there, and let's everybody say hello to one another. We're going to say hello. What are we going to dab on? What are you smoking, Preston? What do you like to smoke?
I'm smoking on some good old fashioned train wreck. This is the first herb that I smoked when I went to Humboldt County. And there's all these new fancy strains out there, but I love good old fashioned train wreck. How about you? What are you smoking out there?
Well, Drake and I are big dabbers. I only dab. I have several different kinds. I had some lemon cake I was hitting on earlier. That's probably my favorite. I'm probably going to go down and get some more of that today at the dispensary. I'm lucky I have some solvent dispensary, a solventless product available at my dispensary at a very good price, I might add. So I'm not complaining. And Drake's a grower up there. He grows his own, and he has an amazing organic garden. What are you puffing today, Drake? I don't know what you got.
I'm not smoking on my own right now. I've got some sour GMO hash rosin that I've just been loving. It's just terped up to all tomorrow. Almost have to cut it with some distillate because it's potent.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah, heavy,
Nice.
funky kind of locker room with a bit of that garlic and just punches you. It's a nice one.
Nice.
Beautiful. LaLa, what you puffing? Are you just puffing the random flower today like you normally are? Whatever bud smells good?
No, I got a little tiny sample of blueberry headband that I'm trying out, but it's not PNF or anything.
We're picky these days, are we?
Flower lately. I'm the one that's like, yeah. But it's good. I mean, all of it's good. All of it's beautiful. I'm just, I usually only smoke my own. So when I'm out, I'm out. But
well, beautiful. Okay. Well, did anybody have any questions in chat? Make sure you get them in because we're going to be finishing up here shortly. Yeah. We've been keeping this guy here long enough, and we really respect your time and really appreciate you coming today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure coming here. One thing I'd like to share is this is a bar of hard soap I just made, and it's really, really easy to make. I mean, from the Jadam technique of making JWA, Jadam wetting agent, it's essentially it's a soap, a liquid castile soap. And all you do to make hard soap is you change the potassium hydroxide called for in the JWA, change that with sodium hydroxide, and now you have a hard soap.
And for everyone out there, it's pretty well 3 ingredients initially for the JWA, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, you want a very soft water. You could use distilled water. You want a fat or oil, and then the potassium hydroxide.
Beautiful. And then you switch that out for what again to make the soap?
So you would switch out the potassium hydroxide for sodium hydroxide, and that will create hard soap.
And that is your JWS, an acronym. And
JWA.
Really cool.
JWA. See, I'm retarded.
Well, you were thinking the soap.
Yeah.
Oh well, whatever.
That is so freaking cool. I used to make soap, but I cheated. I did the melt and pour kind.
Oh, okay.
So with that one, they called that the hot pour, right? Or I can't remember the terminology of soap. And then it also takes longer to cure, and there's some sort of process, right?
Yeah, it does take longer to cure. Yeah, it takes at least 2 weeks. It'll continue hardening off, and it just essentially dehydrates the oils into a really hard soap. So this has been curing for about a month now, and tried it the other day. It's been great. I put some coffee grinds in here for some exfoliant action, and yeah, it's been nice.
I was just going to ask, and I imagine you can add any essential oils you want at a certain period while it's at whatever process, and get those in there and quantify.
Yeah, that's something I'm experimenting with. Definitely, I think with the essential oils, it's crucial to do the first chemical reaction you do with the water and the sodium hydroxide. It heats up to like almost 200 degrees. So I would recommend adding the essential oils like after that first process, when you're adding the rest of the oils back in the mix, or that the water and sodium hydroxide, when that's cooled, you add that now to the oils, and that would be a good time. Like your carrier oils and your essential oils could go in at the same time.
Yeah, you have to know your flash point of your essential oil. Basically, that's your burning off point. Yeah, so that because they vaporize really hot, you got to realize that. It's just like when you take a dab in your banger, how hot it vaporizes off, and you're gonna burn it. So
right, exactly.
The sulfur in alchemy, the soul.
That's right.
Hey. So can you inoculate the hard soaps? Does the JWS affect lacto acid? Can you do a lactose soap?
So that's a great question, and an area I'm super interested in and experimenting with, like creating probiotic soap.
Okay, so let's share. Okay, I'll send you some of mine.
So yeah, I used to be part of a goat milk group, and they used to talk about that and how to do all that information. We need to have a soap show, I think, someday. I need
to get my goats mated.
Yeah, get some goat's milk. It's amazing.
That inoculated biochar.
That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah, that inoculated
Man.
biochar we were talking about. I'm experimenting with putting that into soap.
Wait, say that again?
The inoculated biochar we were chatting about, I'm experimenting putting that into soap.
Of course. Oh, this is a cool
can't
hole
wait.
to dip into, and such a beneficial thing. Like if we can get everyone making that, we're essentially, it's going to be like the probiotic soaps, right? They're going to be beneficial for us, beneficial for the planet, good runoff, and most of all, great for ourselves, right?
I was gonna
absolutely.
suggest a cheese off on a Zoom call, but I think we should do a soap off on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
I think we should do a soap exchange. And
Yeah.
we'll send each other samples.
Let's have a bubble party.
So, on that note, I think we've kept everybody long enough. And did you have any more final questions, LaLa? Or can we just let Preston kind of sum it up? I'm going to let you, LaLa, go ahead. And then maybe we'll, because, I don't want to keep everybody here so long. And we could definitely have another conversation and go down.
Oh, a couple. We would definitely love to have you guys back for this. This has been incredible for us to just sit back and listen. You're just a plethora of knowledge. So continue on, please.
Okay, very cool. I'll just get to my quick circle. I was like, the circle that brings us back to the beginning, just to consider maybe for the next one, is just that, the father with Korean natural farming, coming into a garden in the 70s, right? That's not quite as damaged or devastated by the kind of chemical things and the degradations that we're facing now. So his sort of level of understanding and application were very sophisticated, I think, and the son coming into a world that was needing more management of pests because we were literally losing our abundance and our food source. And so when you think about it, and these just marriages have to do with really getting back to that pristine garden. So whether we're using Jadam and how we're using it in concert, it's really is about the end view of bringing abundance back into our world. So.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well said.
Go ahead, Preston.
Wow.
Did you have any final thoughts today? And did you want to sum up anything? And that is amazing, LaLa. Your words and the way you speak them and the passion behind you definitely shows. I just love it. And you guys were like a duo today. So thank you.
Because we're in love with the world, man.
Yeah. Thank you all. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. I'd love to come back. Final thoughts would just be like, well, I'd like to say one thing about like regenerative farming in general. I think that there's a lot of overlap with whether you're working with biodynamic, Korean natural farming, Jadam, permaculture, all these things. I look for the underlying principles that really like tie them all together, because we can get lost in the language sometimes. So I'm trying to get better about like the acronyms and how I talk about those. So like I can talk to people without it being this encrypted kind of like, encrypted format. And so I'm looking for ways of crossing between those practices. And rather than kind of like jumping on these bandwagons, I think it's really good to look at the regenerative farming and seeing how they all tie together and not like distinguishing them so much. Sure, they're all systems that you can apply on their own, but there's a lot of overlap. So I would like to try to be more inclusive in regenerative farming practices in general.
That's our message completely. So that's beautiful. I love that you're saying that. And there's just an amazing synergy that can happen with everything. And then we're going to be able to have the best of both worlds. And you're most likely going to be able to do the exact same thing you keep doing, but then implementing these other things that go hand in hand and, stack your system and do it in a beautiful way that merits with nature. So it's great. And then I just additionally want to say, where does everyone find you? Do you have any certain places that are best? And are you working on anything or have any products or any places to get those?
Thank you. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Living Abundance Herbals is my Instagram handle. I have a website out there, living-abundance.com. And I sell some tinctures and herbal products that I make. And I will have a lot of KNF inputs on there too as well. I'm making some IMO collection boxes, like hexagonal form, that I'll have for sale pretty soon. And so, yeah, that's where you can find me. And, hoping to do some workshops here in springtime, traveling down to Humboldt again. I want to do another one here in Williams, Oregon. And then I'm trying to line one up in Salt Lake City, Utah too, at the Krishna Gardens out there. So I'm in conversation with those folks right now and hoping to just get out there and spread the word. And I love connecting over the internet too, but really hoping we can get back together in groups and, have those workshops that we really need in person too. So looking forward to that in the future.
So very well said. Thank you again for being here. And please stay on. Don't leave the phone call for a minute. I know LaLa wants to talk and we want to hit up a couple questions. So thanks everybody for tuning in today. We'll be back in on Wednesday. And we have an awesome party planned. We have a seed planting party coming up on New Year's. Today's going to be the last day we're live though for the year though. I think today's the last day, right, Drake? The last time for the year?
It sure is. Friday is the seed planting party.
Yeah. So
Nice.
We'll see you all for the seed planting parties when we'll be live next. And then we also have an amazing guest tuning in. I think James Driscoll with Biodynamics is bioharmonic tonic. Why did I say biodynamic? Bioharmonic tonic is going to be joining us. And to be talking with us on that on Sunday morning. So I'll be looking forward to that because I'm super, super excited to talk to him. He is super knowledgeable and I've been understanding a lot more things about that. So again, Preston, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you guys go follow these guys and LaLa. LaLa will be back again next Wednesday with LaLa.
Thank you all so much.
Have a fabulous note.